Hey everyone, welcome to week 7. And this week we're going to be explaining the relationship between degrees and radians and how to convert degrees to radians and vice versa. Degrees and radians are two different ways that we can measure an angle. We're used to talking about the measurements of angles in degrees. So for example, let's take these black lines and let's think about the circle as a full rotation. So that would be 360 degrees. So at the very beginning, when we just have two lines that are on top of each other, this would be 0 degrees. If we continue around our circle, at this point we'd be at 90 degrees because we'd have a right angle. And then let's say we continue around the circle. Now we have two right angles, 90 and 90 gives us 180 degrees. And then we continue around our circle. So we can have degrees or we can have angles that are bigger than 180 degrees. This would give us 270 degrees because we would have 93 times. And when we do it one more time, this 0 is actually going to be the same thing as 360 degrees. So that's one way that we can measure an angle. The other way is in radians. So we're going to talk more about radians in a couple of seconds, but a full rotation around a circle is 360 degrees. In radians, that is 2 pi radians. And let's talk about what exactly a radian is. A radian is the measure of the central angle of a circle where the arc length is equal to the radius of a circle. So let's see what that means. So we have this line segment right here from the center to the rim of the circle, and this is one radius. We know what a radius is. So let's say I was to take this radius and I was to wrap it around the circle. So the length of this arc is the exact same thing as this radius. So I'm going to label both of them with a capital R. If I was to connect the center of the circle to the length of this arc, notice how it creates what we would normally call an angle and express it in degrees. This time, we're going to say that the measurement of this angle is 1 radian. So that's what a radian is. Before, we said that a full rotation around a circle was 2 pi radians, and let's see where that comes from. If we were to take this measurement and duplicate it throughout the circle, so let's say I was to create another line, and this would be 2 radians because it's the same thing twice. This would be 3 radians. This would be 4 radians. This would be 5 radians. And this would be 6 radians and some change. So this is 6 radians and a little bit extra. Let's see where that little bit extra comes into play. If we take this 2 times pi, we know pi is 3.14. When we multiply those out, that gives us 6.28. So here we have 6 radians and some change. That's what's represented by this. So again, the full rotation of a circle is not only 360 degrees, but when we're talking about radians, it's 2 pi radians or approximately 6.28. Now that we've learned how to differentiate between degrees and radians, let's talk about how we can kind of move one to another. So we talked about degrees again, and they're 360 degrees in a circle. And we said that that's equal to 2 pi radians. If we wanted to simplify this a little bit, let's divide both sides by 2. That means that 180 degrees is going to be the exact same as pi radians. So this is going to be really important to know because this is going to help us convert one set of degrees to radians or radians back to degrees. So there are one of two situations that are going to happen. Either we're going to multiply whatever we're working with by 180 over pi, or we're going to multiply it by pi over 180. And the goal is to either get things to simplify or cancel out. When we are converting degrees to radians, we want to multiply our degrees by pi over 180. And you're going to see we're going to be able to cancel out some things and simplify some values. Let's start with our first example. So we're going to first convert this 30-degree angle. So that would be about that. so a third of that. And we want to convert that to radians. So we're going to multiply this by pi over 180 and then start to simplify. So we are going to have to simplify fractions. So we're going to need to do some practice with that. So we have 30 pi over 180. And when you simplify, a lot of the times with the zeros, we can cancel something out. So we can cancel out those zeros. So that leaves us with 3 over 18 pi. But that's not as simplified as we can get it. Both of these values are divisible by 3. So when we do that, that's going to give us 1 pi, or just pi, over 18 divided by 3 is 6. So this would be 30 degrees in radians. Now let's go to our second example. In our second example, we're talking about 270 degrees. So that angle would be starting here. So we have 0 and we go all the way to 270. So this angle right here, the whole thing, that would be 270 degrees. And let's convert that. So we multiply it by pi over 180. Okay, so that's going to give us 270 pi over 180. And then cancel out our zeros and simplify. So think of the biggest value that can go into both of these numbers. That wouldn't be 3. 3 works, but another one that's bigger works, which would be 9. So 27 divided by 9 would be 3. So that'd be 3 pi. And 18 divided by 9 would be 2. And this would be 270 degrees expressed in radians. All right, let's do our last example. So our last example is 60 degrees. And let me actually change that to be a negative 60 degrees. All right, so when we're dealing with negative angles, instead of going kind of like in this traditional direction, we're actually going to go backwards. So negative 60 degrees would be going backwards 60 degrees. So it would be somewhere right here. So this would be negative 60 degrees. All right, so we'll do the same thing. So multiply by pi over 180. And that's going to give us 60 pi over 180. So we cancel out those zeros. Now we want to think, what number can go into both 6 and 18? The biggest one, which would be 6. 6 divided by 6 is 1, or just pi. And then 18 divided by 6 is going to be 3. And it's negative, so this would be negative pi over 3. And that's that. That's how you convert degrees to radians. Now let's look at how you go backwards and convert radians to degrees. So we talked about the different multipliers. Either we would be multiplying by pi over 180 or 180 over pi. In this case, we're going to be multiplying by 180 over pi. And one trick to help you remember what to do is when you're going from or converting from radians to degrees, we, a lot of the times, are going to be canceling out our pi. It really depends on how your examples are presented, but in all of our examples, you'll have pi, so you'll know that something has to cancel out. So let's see what that looks like. So 2 pi over 9. I'm going to multiply this by 180 over pi. And these pi's cancel out right there. So it just kind of becomes math. So 2 times 180 is going to give you 360. And 360 over 9, when you divide this, that's going to give you 40. So 2 pi over 9 is the same thing as 40 degrees, which should be somewhere like right there. That would be the angle. All right, let's go to negative 5/4 pi, or negative 5 pi over 4. So let's do the same process. So 180 over pi. Cancel out our pi's. And that's going to give us 900. It's negative. So remember, negative means we're going backwards. And that's going to be divided by 4. When we do that, that's going to give us negative 225 degrees. And that is our answer. Negative 225 degrees means we're going backwards. So if I go backwards this much, that's 180. And then 225 is 45 degrees away from 180. So this would be our angle So negative 225 degrees. That's what it would look like as an angle. All right, our last example is pi over 3. All right, so same process. So 180 over pi, which is going to give us 180 pi over 3 pi, but I should have canceled out. I'll cancel it out there. And then here we just divide. So 180 divided by 3, that's going to give us 60 degrees, and that would be our answer. So this is kind of skipping the pi part at the top. Here I brought the entire thing through, but see that you'll still get the answer. So just as a way to wrap up, radian to degree conversion, we multiply by 180 over pi if we are converting from radians to degrees. And if we're going from degrees back to radians, we multiply by pi over 180. All right, so there should be some examples for you to complete after this if you would like to, but good luck and you guys got this.